This is Premier Drive with me, Loretta. Welcome to the FAQ sessions once again. Our series is marriage, and this week is Marriage Week. In fact, across the week here on Premier Christian Radio, you'll have been hearing a variety of resources and encouragement and advice and stories for you to all build your marriage. And we're really privileged to have Michaela Hyde with us throughout our course, the project director at the Marriage Foundation, and she's also the project coordinator of Marriage Week, so she's got lots to share with us. The theme, as you know, is a recipe for a healthy marriage, and this week we are focusing on a key ingredient: intimacy in your marriage. Michaela, thanks once again for being here.
Thank you.
So why is it important for us to invest in our marriages? For Christians, many Christians wait to have sex before they get married. That's an important part. So in that sense, we have this idea that it's this huge, important event. And then suddenly we get married and we're allowed to. And then after a while, maybe it gets sidetracked or waned or not prioritised. So there's a lot we don't talk about as Christians around this. But is it really that important in a marriage?
I think it is very important. I think it's important because intimacy creates a bond. It creates a connection with your partner. And we're talking about intimacy. Absolutely, obviously we're referring to sexual intimacy, but also talking about emotional intimacy. We're talking about spiritual intimacy, and even when we're talking about sexual, I would say physical intimacy, because it doesn't have to be just sex. Intimacy can be about touch and that sort of connection as well. My husband and I are both quite tactile people, so we hold hands. I like to sit close to him if we're watching the TV, particularly if it's been a bit of a tough day, just that closeness. So intimacy, I think, is one of the things that takes your relationship with your partner from a friendship into something that's much, much more. And I think absolutely you're right, for many Christians where it's, they've waited and, the sort of the big day comes along and there's this expectation as well about the first night of, being together and what that's going to be like. And that can be actually quite difficult. It can be a hard time because you're still learning and you're understanding about each other. But I think as your relationship grows, as the other ingredients that we're talking about during Marriage Week, things like communication and commitment and forgiveness and kindness, as those things grow in your relationship, your sexual and physical intimacy becomes, if you like, an expression of that deeper relationship that you have with each other. And I think it can sometimes be kind of misunderstood. And I used to work with teenagers actually, and we talked about the value of sex in a relationship. And often teenagers will be saying, thinking about, it's what I'm going to get from this. How is it going to feel for me? And I think there's a reason why the phrase making love is relevant, is because actually it's about an investment in with your partner. It's about giving of yourself. We both give ourselves to each other when we have sexual intimacy. And it's not about taking from one another. It's about giving. And I think as we give to each other, that sort of depth of relationship will grow and increase. So intimacy, I think, is very important. I think if for certain people, for whatever reason, where sexual intimacy isn't even possible, that's why I'm saying things like touch is so important as well. That sense of connection with somebody and understanding. Intimacy is understanding. I think that's a good way of putting it. It's a deeper understanding of your partner.
So I think it's probably fair to say in most cases, in terms of frequency, if you like, then there's not so much a problem in the early days. As pressures of life, tiredness, jobs, certainly children get involved, it can become less of a priority. Isn't important to prioritise it, or is there the saying, you know what, it's not all about sex, it's not that important, you're together, that's the main thing. How important is it for couples to prioritise intimacy, and even if that's not sexual, but being intentional about it?
I think it is really important to be intentional in that way. I think that with intimacy, there is something about it drawing you closer together, and again reminding you almost of coming back to those wedding vows, and becoming one flesh and what that represents, and that there's something that takes you to a different level when you have that sort of connection. And I think you're absolutely right, Loretta, when life gets busy and you've got children and they're demanding and your job's busy, you can think, oh well, I'll let that drift a bit. It doesn't matter. It's not important. But it is important that we do keep making time so we can maintain that bond and that connection with our partner. For me, sort of intimacy, sexual and, touch, etc., is about maintaining this sort of real deep connection with my husband. And I think that we can sometimes overlook just the value of that, because it almost feels as though it's just for us. It's an indulgent thing. It's something that God gave to us as a gift. He wants us to do this because he knows how important it is. And I think it's interesting, in the Song of Solomon, it talks about that level of intimacy, and it's reflective of how God feels about us. And if you like, that connection you can have with your partner gives you a sense of what God is trying to say to us, the desire he has for us. So on so many levels, it's a really important thing. So I think the key thing is definitely make time for that. Don't be hung up on the how often or who's doing what, how often, etc. There is this thing, isn't there? Yeah. Right, again, I worked with teenagers, and they would talk to a couple about their relationship, and they often would say, well, how many times do you have sex then, if they were brave enough to ask? And I'd say, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how often that you have sex. As a couple, you decide, you work that out, have it fairly regularly. You don't want to sort of have it every 3 years. And we've decided every 3 years is just fine. But actually, the frequency doesn't matter. It's about being intentional and making sure that you keep, creating that space and time, and being clear with each other, communicate with each other about it as well. I think you mentioned about, the church, and, we don't talk about it enough. I think it almost feels like this big taboo. It's one of those things where, we know that's happening now, let them get on with it, and that's fine. And but actually it's important that we talk to each other. And if sex is difficult for any reason, or it's hard, or you're feeling nervous, talk to your partner. We need to communicate. And I'd also go as far as to say that if for any reason you're finding having sex together is a problem, and there are couples where this is true, so don't think you're the only one in that situation, then get some help. We've got one of our ambassadors for Marriage Week is Emma Waring, and she's a sexual sort of therapist. And going to somebody like that, or getting a book, reading about it, learning about each other, it is such an important and beautiful thing to have in a relationship. And I think that you'll be missing out on that deeper connection if you don't pursue it.
So a few things there. Obviously, the communication. So in terms of forget what anyone else is doing, what is right for both of you. You've communicated that once a month, once a year, whatever is okay for you. It's making sure that both of you are okay with that.
Yeah.
But would you go as far as advising couples to schedule it in? Is it unromantic to schedule intimate time?
Absolutely. We schedule so many things, don't we, in our lives? I am a bit of a sort of person. I'm putting this in my diary, and I don't put it in my diary, I might add. That would be embarrassing, wouldn't it? My kids stumbled across it as well. But I think that talking about when you're going to have sex is a good idea, because otherwise it can get pushed aside, and making space and time for that as well. So if you do schedule it for a particular day or evening or whatever, and then think, well, we've got 20 minutes, make space and time so that it isn't just about having sex. It is about intimacy. It is about connecting. It is about coming together, becoming one, being close. So create space around those scheduled times. And as you do that, it doesn't feel like you're ticking a box at all. You're being practical, because everyone is busy. That's everyone's answer to life today. How are you? Busy. So create space, create time for your partner to make that happen. Yeah.
What about imbalances? So, for example, if somebody it doesn't feel like it, and or your drives are very mismatched, or your ways of communicating, perhaps you're not a tactile person at all. In fact, that really irritates you. So, what about if you're very different in that sense? What can you do then?
Yeah, I think absolutely, people obviously do have different sex drives, so there will be a greater kind of sense of wanting to have intimacy for one than the other. Again, I would say communication is absolutely crucial, that you need to listen to each other. I think there are times when, if one in particular is tired or exhausted or it's been busy, that we have to respect our partner's feelings and think, okay, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen today. It might be at that point that you then do talk about, well, when can we have sex? When is that going to happen? So that it is scheduled in. So the person who perhaps has that greater sex drive has a sense of, okay, this is when I can expect that. So then there isn't that kind of tension in between, thinking, well, is it going to happen or is it not going to happen? I think there are also times where, if you like, when one person is desiring sex and the other one isn't, almost kind of look at it in a different way. This coming back to this giving of ourselves to our partner. And it might be that you choose to stimulate your partner in some way, but you choose to abstain yourself, but you're connecting with them and you're giving a gift to them, essentially. But as I say, it can be either way. It can be, we're both tired and exhausted, I'm sorry, it's just not going to happen. Or, no, this is fine, this is what I'll do for you because I love you, and it's an expression of my love for you and connecting with you. So I think talking about these things, I just feel that communication is one of the big issues, particularly because people can feel a bit awkward and shy. If you're coming from a Christian background, maybe nobody talked about it at all. You didn't have any kind of sex talks or what have you. I have to say, when we got married, there was so many things I didn't realise I know about, and I was talking, my husband and I talked about things, and we just talked about it. We talked about it so that we could both learn together, and I learned a bit more than he did, I think it's fair to say. So it's a learning process. It's coming together and learning together and being open about it. There are no kind of right or wrongs. It's not, how good are you at this, or you. Again, is this, when I've talked to teenagers in the past, and they're like, one of the things they talk about hopes and aspirations for a relationship, and they nearly always write good sex. And I said, it's not about, seeking good sex. Good sex comes when you are close together as a couple, when you are kind, when you're committed, when all the other areas of your life with your husband or wife are in fruition. When those things are happening, that's when the sex is good, because of the depth of relation that's already there. So try and move away from, am I any good? Am I any good as a partner, as a sexual partner? Take away that pressure. This is something you're doing together. Talk about it, learn together, read books, get ideas, new ideas, make it interesting. It really is something that's worth investing and making time for.
Some great stuff there. Michaela, thank you so much for talking to us so openly about this. I know, again, the Marriage Foundation have lots of resources and help for couples in this area. Just give us the website again.
So it's www.marriage-week.org.uk.
Thank you so much. Next week, this one doesn't necessarily apply to everyone, but it certainly affects marriages when it does happen. We're talking about parenting next week. Do join us then.